Hey there, ever felt like you're just stuck? Like you can't seem to get moving no matter how hard you try? Well, what if I told you that it might not be laziness at all? What if you're actually burnt out and you don't even know it? Stick around, because we're about to dive deep into the 7 telltale signs that you're not lazy, you're burnt out. And trust me, knowing the difference could change everything. 1. The exhaustion that just won't quit. You know that feeling when you've had a full night's sleep, but you still wake up feeling like you've run a marathon. That's not just being tired, that's burnout knocking at your door. We're talking about the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones, making even the simplest tasks feel like climbing Mount Everest. Let's break it down. When you're lazy, a good night's sleep or a relaxing weekend usually does the trick. But burnout? It's like a vampire sucking the life out of you day after day. You might find yourself hitting the snooze button more times than you can count, or struggling to keep your eyes open during that 2 p.m. meeting. And no matter how many cups of coffee you down, that fog just won't lift. This isn't your run-of-the-mill tiredness. We're talking about a deep, persistent fatigue that doesn't go away, even when you've ticked off everything on your to-do list. It's the kind of exhaustion that makes you wonder if you're coming down with something, but the doctor gives you a clean bill of health. And here's the kicker, this exhaustion isn't just physical, it's mental and emotional too. You might find yourself zoning out during conversations, forgetting important details, or feeling emotionally drained after simple social interactions. It's like your brain is running on fumes, and every little task feels like it's draining what little energy you have left. So, if you're constantly feeling like you're trudging through quicksand, it might be time to consider that you're not lazy or burnt out. And recognizing this is the first step towards getting your mojo back. 2. When your passion fizzles out. Remember when you used to bounce out of bed, excited to tackle the day? When your job, your hobbies, or your side hustle used to light a fire in your belly? Well, if those days feel like a distant memory, you might be dealing with burnout, not laziness. Let's paint a picture. You used to be the go-getter, the one with a million ideas and the energy to match. But lately, it's like someone's turned down the volume on your enthusiasm. Tasks that used to excite you now feel like chores. That project you've been dreaming about for months. It's gathering dust in the corner of your mind. This isn't just a case of the Monday blues or a temporary slump. We're talking about a persistent lack of motivation that seeped into every aspect of your life. Your hobbies? They don't bring the same joy they used to. Your career goals? They seem further away than ever. And here's where it gets tricky. This loss of passion can often be mistaken for laziness. But there's a crucial difference. Laziness is about not wanting to put in the effort. Burnout, it's about not having any effort left to give. You might find yourself going through the motions, doing the bare minimum to get by. But deep down, there's a nagging feeling that you should be doing more, achieving more. And that disconnect between what you feel you should be doing and what you're actually capable of doing, that's burnout in action. It's like trying to light a match in a rainstorm. No matter how much you want that spark, the conditions just aren't right. Your passion isn't gone, it's just buried under layers of exhaustion and overwhelm. So if you're beating yourself up for being lazy, because you can't seem to muster up enthusiasm for things you used to love, it's time to cut yourself some slack. This isn't laziness, it's your mind and body telling you that something's got to give. 3. The productivity paradox. Here's a mind bender for you. What if working harder actually made you less productive? Sounds crazy, right? But when burnout's in the picture, that's exactly what happens. We're not talking about a little dip in your output, we're talking about a nosedive in productivity that leaves you wondering where all your time went. Picture this, you're sitting at your desk, staring at your to-do list. It's not even that long, but each task feels like scaling a mountain. You start working on something, but your mind wanders. You check your email, scroll through social media, then realize an hour's gone by and you've accomplished nothing. Rinse and repeat. This isn't your garden variety procrastination. When you're burnt out, simple tasks that you used to breeze through now feel like complex puzzles. Writing that report, it takes twice as long and comes out half as good. Responding to emails. You find yourself reading the same sentence over and over, struggling to make sense of it. And here's the real kicker, you might actually be putting in more hours than ever. But despite the long days and late nights, your output is shrinking. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, it never seems to get full. This productivity paradox is a classic sign of burnout, but it's often mistaken for laziness. After all, if you're not getting things done, you must be slacking off, right? Wrong. The truth is, you're working harder than ever. Your brain just can't keep up. You might find yourself making more mistakes, missing deadlines, or producing work that's not up to your usual standards. And the worst part, you know you're capable of better, which only adds to your frustration and stress. It's a vicious cycle. The more your productivity drops, the more stressed you become. The more stressed you are, the harder it is to focus and get things done. And round it goes, leaving you feeling more burnt out than ever. So if you're beating yourself up for not being as productive as you used to be, it's time to consider that burnout might be the real culprit. Because sometimes the harder you push, the less you achieve, and that's not laziness. That's your mind and body crying out for a break. 4. When your body sounds the alarm. Think burnout is all in your head. Think again. Your body's got a funny way of sending out SOS signals when you're pushing yourself too hard. And let me tell you, these aren't signals you want to ignore. Let's start with the headaches. We're not talking about your run-of-the-mill tension headache that goes away with a couple of aspirin. Nope, we're talking about persistent, nagging headaches that seem to set up camp at the base of your skull or behind your eyes. They might come and go, but they're showing up way more often than they should. Then there's the muscle tension. You might find yourself with shoulders so tight they're practically touching your ears. Or maybe it's a constant knot in your lower back that no amount of stretching seems to ease. It's like your body's physically bracing itself against the stress you're under. Sleep? Oh boy, that's a whole other ball game. You might be exhausted all day, but as soon as your head hits the pillow, your mind starts racing. Or maybe you fall asleep easily enough, but you wake up at 3 a.m., your thoughts spinning like a hamster wheel. Either way, you're not getting the restorative sleep your body desperately needs. And let's not forget about your immune system. When you're burnt out, your body's defenses take a hit. You might find yourself catching every cold that goes around the office, or dealing with infections that seem to linger longer than they should. Some people even experience digestive issues when they're burnt out. Stomach aches, nausea, changes in appetite. Your gut has a direct line to your brain, and when your brain's stressed, your stomach often pays the price. Here's the thing, these physical symptoms aren't just inconveniences. They're your body's way of waving a big red flag, telling you that something's got to give. But all too often we ignore these signs. We pop a pill for the headache, chug another coffee to fight the fatigue, and keep pushing ourselves. And that's where the confusion with laziness often comes in. You might be tempted to push through these physical symptoms, telling yourself to toughen up or stop being lazy. But that's like ignoring the check engine light on your car. Sure, you might keep going for a while, but eventually you're headed for a breakdown. So if you're experiencing persistent physical symptoms that you can't quite explain, it might be time to consider that burnout, not laziness, is the real culprit. Because your body knows when you're running on empty, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. 5. The emotional roller coaster. All right, let's talk emotions. When you're burnt out, your emotional landscape can start to look like a theme park ride, and not the fun kind. We're talking mood swings, irritability, and a general sense of meh that colors everything you do. First up, let's tackle the irritability. You know those days when everything and everyone seems to get on your last nerve? When the sound of your coworker chewing their lunch makes you want to flip a table? Yeah, that's not just you being grumpy. When you're burnt out, your fuse gets shorter than a candle wick in a hurricane. Then there's the emotional numbness. This isn't just feeling a little down, it's like someone's turned the volume down on your emotions. Things that used to bring you joy? They barely register. Achievements that should make you proud. You just shrug them off. It's like you're watching your life through a foggy window, detached from everything going on around you. And let's not forget about anxiety. When you're burnt out, your mind can become a breeding ground for worst-case scenarios. You might find yourself lying awake at night, your thoughts spinning out of control. Or maybe you're constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's exhausting, and it's definitely not laziness. Here's where it gets really tricky. Burnout can sometimes look a lot like depression. You might lose interest in things you used to enjoy, struggle to find meaning in your work or relationships, or feel a persistent sense of hopelessness. And while burnout and depression can coexist, they're not the same thing. Burnout is typically tied to a specific situation or set of circumstances, while depression is more pervasive. Now, you might be thinking, but I'm not crying all the time or having massive meltdowns. Doesn't that mean I'm okay? Not necessarily. Sometimes burnout manifests as a kind of emotional flatness. You're not particularly sad, but you're not happy either. You're just existing. And that can be just as concerning as more dramatic emotional swings. The real kicker. All these emotional symptoms can make you feel like you're just not trying hard enough. You might beat yourself up for not being able to snap out of it or look on the bright side. But here's the truth: you can't positive think your way out of burnout. These emotional changes aren't a sign of weakness or laziness, they're your psyche's way of telling you that something needs to change. So if you find yourself on an emotional roller coaster or feeling like you're stuck in emotional neutral, it might be time to consider that burnout, not laziness, is the real issue. Because sometimes the most productive thing you can do is acknowledge your feelings and give yourself permission to feel them. 6. The cognitive conundrum. Let's talk about your brain for a minute. You know, that amazing organ that's gotten you through school, landed you jobs, and helped you navigate life's twists and turns. Well, when burnout hits, it's like someone's tossed a wrench into its gears. And let me tell you, the results aren't pretty. First up, let's talk about focus, or rather, the lack of it. Remember when you could sit down and power through a task without breaking a sweat? Well, when you're burnt out, that laser-like focus turns into something more like a disco ball scattering your attention in a million different directions. You might find yourself reading the same paragraph over and over, or zoning out in the middle of important conversations. It's not that you're not trying, your brain just can't seem to latch onto anything for more than a few seconds. Then there's the memory issues. We're not talking about occasionally forgetting where you put your keys. We're talking about walking into a room and completely blanking on why you're there. Or having a colleague ask about that report you promised, only to realize you have zero recollection of ever discussing it. It's like your short-term memory has gone on vacation without leaving a forwarding address. Decision-making. Oh boy, that's a whole other ball game. When you're burnt out, even the simplest choices can feel overwhelming. Should you have the chicken or the fish for dinner? Your brain treats this like it's a life-altering decision. And don't even get me started on bigger choices, they can leave you paralyzed with indecision. And let's not forget about creativity. If your job or hobbies require any kind of creative thinking, burnout can feel like someone's drained all the color out of your world. Ideas that used to flow freely now trickle out reluctantly, if at all. You might find yourself staring at a blank page or canvas, feeling like you've completely lost your mojo. Here's where it gets really frustrating: you know you're capable of better. You remember a time when your brain worked smoothly, when ideas came easily and problems got solved efficiently. And that disconnect between what you know you can do and what you're currently able to do, that's burnout in action. The real danger here is that these cognitive issues can easily be mistaken for laziness or incompetence. You might start to doubt your abilities, wondering if you've somehow lost your edge. But here's the truth: your brain isn't broken, it's just overwhelmed. It's like trying to run too many programs on an overheated computer. Things are bound to slow down or crash. So if you find yourself struggling to focus, remember details, make decisions, or think creatively, it might be time to consider that burnout, not laziness, is the culprit. Because your brain is an incredible tool, but even the best tools need maintenance and care to function at their best. 7. The social withdrawal syndrome. Let's chat about your social life for a minute. You know, that thing you used to have before burnout decided to crash the party? Yeah, that one. When you're burnt out, your social life can take a hit in ways you might not even realize. First off, let's talk about that sudden urge to become a hermit. Remember when you used to be the life of the party? Or at least, showed up to the party. Well, when burnout sets in, the mere thought of socializing can feel like someone's asking you to climb Everest in flip-flops. You might find yourself making excuses to skip gatherings, turning down invitations, or breathing a sigh of relief when plans get cancelled. But it's not just about avoiding social events. Even when you do drag yourself out, you might feel off, like you're watching the world through a pane of glass. Conversations that used to flow easily now feel like hard work. You might struggle to engage, finding yourself nodding along without really listening, or desperately watching the clock, counting down the minutes until you can escape back to your solitude. And let's not forget about your relationships. When you're burnt out, even the people closest to you can start to feel like a burden. You might snap at your partner over small things, or find yourself avoiding calls from friends. It's not that you don't care about them anymore, you're just too exhausted to engage in the give and take that relationships require. Work relationships take a hit too. That colleague you used to chat with by the coffee machine, now you're taking the long way around just to avoid small talk. Team projects that you used to enjoy now feel like torture. You might find yourself withdrawing from office banter or ducking out of after-work drinks. Here's where it gets tricky. This withdrawal can easily be mistaken for introversion or even rudeness. You might start to feel guilty, telling yourself you're being antisocial or lazy. But here's the truth: when you're burnt out, socializing isn't just unappealing, it's downright exhausting. Your energy reserves are so depleted that even a simple conversation feels like it's draining what little you have left. The real danger here is isolation. As you withdraw more and more, you're cutting yourself off from the very support systems that could help you through this tough time. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more you isolate yourself, the more burnt out you feel, and the more you want to isolate yourself. So if you find yourself constantly making excuses to avoid social interactions or feeling disconnected, even when you're with people you care about, it might be time to consider that burnout, not laziness or antisocial tendencies, is the real issue. Because humans are social creatures, and when being social starts to feel like a chore, that's a big red flag that something's not right.